Gentlemen, would you tell us who you are and why are you here to talk to us about acting? What do you do with this acting thing?
You want to answer for me, and then I can answer for you? My name's Dylan Bruno. I've been an actor for about 18 years now. Been fortunate enough that that's been my only job. I got into it kind of accidentally and on a whim. Long story that maybe we'll get into at some point. Maybe not.
Feel free to share it. We'd love to hear it.
Well, all right. Now I have to do the short version. My brother's been an actor for a long time, and I was visiting my brother in New York City, and I was on the street, and I literally got stopped by a woman who asked me if I would be interested in meeting a photographer she worked for. I met with him. I did a little modeling. That led to a commercial that I got because my agent had set me up with some commercial auditions. And I had it was a GM commercial where I was the spokesman for GM, which is funny because I'm now working for GM again doing voiceover. That was, 18 years ago. And my commercial ran only in California in the local market and ran about 20 times a day. And I left and I went ski bumming. It was just living off my residuals, which you could do back then, which you can't anymore. But so I got a phone call while I was skiing one day, and my agent was like, "Hey, are you sitting down?" And I was like, "Yeah." They said, "Well, Steven Spielberg called today, and he wants to meet you. He saw your commercial." So he flew me out to L.A., and I started doing I met with him and met with his casting people, and he put me on what's called a development deal. So they paid me for a year to do nothing and be available for them. And DreamWorks' first series was called High Incident, and they wrote a role for me on that, and that started me acting. And so there I was. I had finished school and was working as an engineer before that. So just sort of like completely 180'd my life. And I always said that as long as it's not fun or challenging or interesting to me, or as long as it is, I'll stay with it. As soon as it's not, I'll move on. And knock wood, here I am 18 years later, still enjoying it, having some great experiences and finding some challenges with it. So weirdly, I have a tech company on the side because, after about 15 years, I kind of started to miss it, and recently got back involved with some engineers from school and some sales guys that are buddies of mine, and we've developed some products, and we've created a startup, and looking like we're getting pretty close to selling it, so knock wood on that.
Well, first of all, I guess the lesson from your story is just to hang out on the streets of New York a lot.
Yeah.
Right?
It always works.
just bum around. Well, I've got a few connections to this. I started off in this industry, in the theater industry, as an actor and a director, but eventually just started concentrating on directing and producing, which is what I do now mainly. But I also work with an organization called SAG Indie, which is largely why I'm here on this panel today, because SAG Indie is an organization that was started by the Screen Actors Guild about 10 years ago, a little over 10 years ago, to help be a bridge to the low-budget independent filmmaking community. We go out to film festivals, we run our own workshops and panels, and do all kinds of events at schools and just with independent filmmakers to help not only explain how to work with union actors as filmmakers, but also to serve as a kind of a buffer between the filmmakers and the actors, mainly because a lot of low-budget independent filmmakers are scared to death of the union for reasons that are real and unreal sometimes. And we kind of help them. We are, I get phone calls from filmmakers that are freaking out because they did something that they think is wrong, or about to do something that they think is wrong, or have an actor that did something that thinks is going to, be bad for their production. So they come to me or they come to us, and we try to help them kind of get through the red tape of what happens at the union. And then the third thing we do is we are able, because we're filmmakers that make up SAG Indie, we're in the community and we are making films, and we understand where kind of the problems are for filmmakers, for independent filmmakers. So we come back to the union and say, hey guys, this is not working. You need to tweak this. You need to start figuring this out and that and the other. So that's the long and short.
So Michael, I know everybody who's here in the audience got one of these. Yeah. Do you want to say a little bit about this and where they can find it online?
Yeah, this is very briefly. Feel free to look at this whenever you want to. This is a breakdown of the low-budget agreements. SAG-AFTRA, it's now called SAG-AFTRA's low-budget film agreements. And you can get this online, a version of this online at sagindy.org.
So, and that's a great segue into the whole conversation about the merger that happened this last year and the way it impacts productions, the way it impacts you as an actor. Tell us what happened.
Yeah, I mean, from my perspective, and I think we were talking about this outside, I think that nobody really understands exactly what happened and what the results will be from it. But from my perspective, back before the merger, during the first writer's strike and then the looming actors' strike, SAG was working really hard to try to leverage all of the television and film talent to get us a much better contract against the producers unions. And it felt like somewhere along the line, after a kind of jumped ship and mutinied and sort of made their own deal, and it felt like it took a lot of the power away from SAG. And once AFTRA made a deal, then SAG really kind of had to follow because they were losing a lot of production to AFTRA. And it then at that point became absolutely essential that we all get together, which ultimately is what we really wanted in the long run anyway. And, you know, now I think putting them together, just trying to find the most power that we have to gain back and slowly make back the steps that we lost along the way in the last deal that we negotiated or settled with.
Well, I think it's always, I mean, I don't want to digress too much, but I think it's always a smart thing to kind of, when you talk about especially any creative union and specifically the actors, either actors union, any of the actors unions, to go back in time to the beginning of film and to kind of look at what that was when this art and medium called film started. And, you know, essentially what you had was a bunch of guys with these new cameras going out and shooting things on the street. And then they said, hey, we can make stories with this. Let's just get these theater actors together. And gradually it coalesced into an industry. And that industry was based on this idea of companies, like theater companies. So you have actors that are under contract to your company. And for years and years and years, this is how the industry was shaped. So studios, as we came to know them, owned everyone. They owned their actors, they owned their writers, they owned their directors. They owned their careers, 5, 10-year contracts, whatever they want. And they could make or break you. They could work you around the clock. They could tell you you're not working anymore. They could say you didn't sleep with the right producer. You're done. But you can't go anywhere else because we still have you under contract. They could rule your personal life. They could do pretty much whatever they wanted with you because they had you under contract. So, you know, you cut to the 1920s, 1930s, a bunch of actors, very powerful people got together and said, we're going to form a union so that we can start breaking this process. And little by little, pretty quickly, actually, most of the actors in Hollywood said, okay, let's do this. And they jumped on board and they kind of started to break down the system. And eventually the studio system, through that and through other issues with you know, breaking down their hold on distribution, the studio system started to collapse. So actors, directors, writers could go wherever they wanted, negotiate whatever deal they wanted to do. And eventually what happened is that coalesced into, we want to be paid this much money for the work we do, at least this much money. And this much money to people in the 1990s, your Steven Soderberghs and your Spike Lees who were just starting out, was a lot of money on a daily basis because they were making tiny little movies. And those tiny little movies started to make money all of a sudden, started to create an industry that we sort of now call the independent film industry. And the union, again, made up of actors who make rules and negotiate with producers, looked at each other and said, hey, maybe we should do these little movies. Maybe we should allow our folks to do these small films. And keep in mind that more than 90%, maybe even 95% of the union's membership do not make their livings acting. So there are a lot of people out there that just want to get into stuff, have their work seen, and just do their art and have the possibility of getting to the point where they can be paid and make a living off of it. So they created these low budget agreements. And eventually, you know, there's these different unions. There's SAG, there's AFTRA, there's Equity, there's all these different unions. And, you know, like Dylan was just saying, you know, at a certain point, you know, you look at each other and say, why don't we just all get together and we have more power that way? So the more central the power is with the labor, which is essentially what actors are, their labor, the stronger the deals can be, essentially.
Yeah, and correct me if I'm wrong. So the difference, really, the central difference between SAG and AFTRA was SAG was anything that was on film, and AFTRA was anything other than that.
Yeah.
And like once you started opening up to all these new, to digital, to tape, etc., it's like you're still doing the same thing. You're still acting. You're still making content. You're still, building art. And it definitely didn't seem to make sense to have different unions governing it when you're ultimately, trying to accomplish the same goal, just with different tools.
Yeah, it seemed like not too long ago you had actors who were platform specific. So you'd have your television actors, and they just never did film. And if they broke in and got a film, it was like really big news. Or the other way, you had film actors that just never would do TV and that sort of stuff. How has that changed? Well,
it's definitely changing. I mean, in the past, you're right. Not only was it just, TV actors were looked down upon by film actors. And if you were a film actor who did a TV show, suddenly people were like, oh, his career's done. He's a TV actor now. He's no longer in films. And underneath that is soap operas. Forget about it. That you're like in this weird ghetto where like you cannot break into real TV or commercial actors and even theater. Obviously, it's sort of a different medium, but still they're actors. So there's for years been this weird thing, but now, yeah, you're right. The reality is that everything, as we all know, is shifting in a big way. That these walls are breaking down, and it's a good thing.
Yeah, and I actually had an experience with that. So before I started, I was on a show called Numbers for 6 years as a CBS crime drama. I played an FBI agent. And before that, I had done a lot of films, but I had never been a lead in a film that made a lot of money. And so it was getting harder and harder for me to get roles in films and TV now that was 9 years ago before I started Numbers. TV was sort of the thing that I had more of a chance in getting work in. Unfortunately, I was able to. I got Numbers. I was on that show for 6 years, and walking through the production office and the writer's room and seeing the actors that were there auditioning for guest stars. Started out that they were all guys like me who, had a tough time getting big film roles and were just trying to get what they could in TV. And then a couple of years in, I started seeing guys from big movies sitting in the waiting room, and I'm like, what's this guy doing auditioning? And with the end, I wouldn't see anybody that I didn't recognize sitting in the waiting room. And now that I'm off the show and I go in, I'll audition for a guest star. Every single person in there. I thought I'm coming off of 6 years on a show. I'll be a little bit above everyone. I'll have a good chance of getting in. And I'm not. Everyone else has been on a show that's ran at least 6 years, maybe 2 series, maybe 3. And they're all sitting there with 25 other guys just auditioning for one guest star that they're only willing to pay top of show for. And they won't break that.
So has the economics changed?
Yeah, I think that's directly related to the fact that we've got many more outlets, with cable, with internet. There's so many places to distribute content, and you kind of have a finite number of viewers. Everybody's still watching, you can't really find, unless the population grows tremendously, you basically have the same percentage of the population that's watching. You're spreading them out over more platforms, so you've got, per each piece of content, you have less eyeballs, which means that advertisers are willing to pay less to run their ads there. And if the advertisers are willing to pay less, then they're making less money off the show, and they're going to cut corners where they can. And the first place they're going to try is actors that are trying to get a job. And, I saw that really early on. Every time a contract was renegotiated, they would always try to make it worse than the previous contract. And when I started out in acting, it felt like every job you went from one to another, your contract always got a little better. And instead, I was watching myself and all of my friends' contracts try to be knocked down and have pieces chipped away from it, and that became a huge fight. And ultimately, the studios are these monolithic entities that control the distribution, and, you're eventually going to have to lose to that, and you're going to have to cave and just take work where you can. So now I find that you have a lot of big actors that can't make the same amount of money they made off of 1 or 2 or 3 projects a year. So now they need to do 10 or 12 or 15 for just lower pay, but they need to try to cobble together the same living that they've been used to making.
Well, it's audience, and it's also, it's easier to make films. It's easier to make web series. It's easier to make TV. It's easier across the boards. I mean, look at the cameras you have here. These are high-def cameras. I mean, these are, it's within reach. I mean, every 17-year-old kid is making films with their phones. It's everywhere now. I used to always say, well, if it was easy, everybody would be doing it. Well, guess what? Everybody is doing it. The difference is that the more things change, the more they stay the same. Because it still comes down to, yes, there's more stuff out there. Yes, there's way more competition on everywhere, from actors to filmmakers to distributors to platforms. But the more things change, the more they stay the same, in that it does come down to having something that people react to, having quality material that people say, I want to watch this, and I want to watch it again, and the next one, and the next one, and finding that market. And it can be a niche market, or it can, like Hollywood, be the big, giant tentpole market. But there's so many different variables out there and so many different markets out there that, for actors and for filmmakers, it's all about finding the best stories, making the best stories you can make in as compelling a way as you can make it, and finding your audience. And it ain't easy on any tip, in any way, and keeping that audience. And, a big problem with a lot of filmmakers is that, we tend to just want to make films. We don't tend to want to be marketing people and distributors. But, in many ways, we have to become our own marketing team and distribution team if there's not that ton of money behind it. And frankly, even when there is a ton of money behind it, you kind of have to babysit it anyway, especially if you're an independent.
And that's, I think, a great transition. Some actors have been extraordinarily adept at leveraging social media to build their personal brand, to get gigs, and to develop these massive followings. What is the role of social media in the career of an actor today?
I don't think it's fully understood yet. I mean, that's just for a second to go back to what he was talking about, then I'll come back to this. Like, what's so exciting about it is, like you said, that every 17-year-old kid with a camera phone can start creating content. And there's actually a distribution channel where people can see it and they can find it. And like you said, niche markets will find things on the internet. It's all about getting eyeballs. And even if it's a smaller market, a smaller audience, it still has a chance to live, and that's really exciting. And I think now what you've got is the massive old school sort of template format commercial, and then you've got the new people that are doing their own thing, innovative, and really bringing some new excitement and enthusiasm and some fresh content to the world. And it's, I think, about finding that middle ground where you'll have content aggregators that can direct you to valuable content that's new and different and innovative that can actually then open up to the commercial market and get the big dollars. And of course, the way to get there is through social media. And I don't really know what it is that makes someone big or popular or influential in social media. I'm not sure that anybody does. It sort of happens with
money.
Yeah.
Money. It's money. It's back to money. It comes back to hiring people to do it for you. It comes back to that marketing budget, And unfortunately,
but don't you think that there are the instances where someone ends up with a huge following without any money?
Totally, absolutely.
I mean, I don't really know the whole Justin Bieber story, but right, I mean, he was on YouTube and just millions of people watched him. And
absolutely true, but it's like a needle in a haystack. And, you know what I mean? There are very few of those people that happens to, because they, whatever planets align. But I mean, that's not so different from a regular acting or film career. I mean, you had somebody stop you on the street. That's a needle in a haystack thing.
Yeah.
That there are actors, Jack Lemmon used to say that he knew guys that were 10 times more talented than he was, but he just happened to get the right roles in the right movies that hit. So there is a level of luck to it, but it's also the just going out and doing it and making it happen and keep working on it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like you're right. It's a needle in a haystack, and as you said, my thing with walking down a street in New York, but it's suddenly everyone, no matter where they live, they can walk on a street in New York. So I think it's still a needle in a haystack, but at least there's the opportunity for people who otherwise wouldn't have had it. The social media thing, I mean, we talked briefly about the Zach Braff, was it a Kickstarter campaign? Didn't he raise like $5 million in 4 days? I mean, unbelievable. And then, I did a thing on, it's called Black Box TV. It's Anthony Zucker's YouTube channel. He's from the CSI franchise. And, it appears to me that he's having trouble getting viewers there. And, I'm not sure why a guy who's in charge of one of the biggest franchises on the planet is having trouble getting viewers. Like, I don't know what translates from one market to another, one genre, one age group to another, and I think that's where everyone is scratching their head trying to figure it out.
And that's one of the reasons that SAG-AFTRA, for one, their new media agreements when it comes to web series and everything, they've got a very open end right now. It's all sort of like negotiating mostly on a case by case basis in terms of how much their actors get paid, because the industry this is a new time. It really is. Things have been reshuffled in such a way that everybody is sort of still seeing where the dust is falling. This is a big year because Netflix broke through with these original series, which is really interesting, and everybody's going, oh, okay, that's starting to look like something. But what about all these different outlets and all these different things that are potential snag films? We'll see. Distribution outlets. So there is a level where the people that are distributing the films and that are making the films or web series are still kind of figuring out how that works.
So, and there's this whole thing that's been going on since the dawn of YouTube, this vlogging. It's it's like steady camera, person just talking to the camera, hard cuts all the time, that sort of stuff. And those people get famous and go on and have good, successful careers so far. Some of them cross over and do commercial work. How does that sort of audience engagement, where you're having like direct daily interaction with an audience, and you immediately someone makes a comment, and then the next day there's a response, a video response. How does that play into the shows today, the building the career, that sort of stuff?
I mean, it's sort of, to me, a phenomenon. I'm getting older, and I don't consume my content in the way that most people are consuming it now. I have a friend, and his daughter is 12, and she helps us take care of our kids sometimes. And she doesn't watch anything on a television. She doesn't go to movies. Everything is on her phone, and nothing is more than a minute and a half long. And I can't spend more than 10 minutes doing that. I get bored and I have to move on. But I mean, she is the way that most kids are today. And like you said, they're looking into a camera and talking. That's most of what she's watching. And I don't know how that's going to translate. I mean, I'm not sure you can take someone like that and suddenly turn them into a huge Hollywood blockbuster star. But there's some other kind of content that you can definitely translate that person into and monetize it. But I think people are obviously having trouble figuring out how to monetize it. Is it a subscription model? Is it, is it a content aggregator model? Is it a pay-per-view? And I don't know. I mean, I'm really excited to see where that all shakes out. I think we've got a little bit of an intoxication right now with this new sort of innovative content that is available, but nobody knows what to do with it. Nobody knows what the new next norm and the next formats and the next real structure and dynamics of this industry are going to be, but it's going to be somewhere in between.
Well, I think that's a bug flyer.
Yeah.
It's just a dragonfly. They don't bite. I think that for actors, it is a really strange time, and we can keep saying this over and over, but this is the new reality. I mean, fame for fame's sake is as we all know, we've seen this, our entire society change because of this, right? I mean, there are all these people out there that are just, some of them are actors. A lot of them are would be people who in another time would simply, do theater in school, go to school, do more theater, do some film. Maybe they would drop out. Maybe they do maybe they become quote unquote stars. Maybe they become serious Broadway, whatever. But there's a lot of people that are just out there that are gaining this quote unquote fame for the sake of having fame. Some of them make money. Most of them don't. A lot of the people on reality TV shows, a lot of actors on reality TV, a lot of the people quote unquote on reality TV shows are actors. There are people who are in Hollywood there to read scripts and audition, and the reality is that there's so much more work in reality TV for actors right now that they go play themselves sort of on reality TV, a version of themselves. So that's changing the acting world, I would say. And I think there's just like with independent filmmakers, there's a weird pressure on actors and independent filmmakers, to to figure out what their online presence is, what we're talking about. What do I go and do a YouTube channel and record something every day? I mean, there used to be this whole notion of mystery and with stars, where you get to see them when you get to see them, and then they hide away in their own homes, and it's a mystery. We don't get to see where Paris Hilton takes a bath, or whatever. We
we always get to see where Paris Hilton took a bath.
Or like Marilyn Monroe. We don't get to go inside Marilyn Monroe's house.
Better
No,
example.
it's a mystery. We get to think of that. So things have changed in a big way, I think, for actors in that regard. But again, the more things change, the more they stay the same. People are still reacting to something that is, I don't want to say magical, but let's say magical, within these people and the work that they are doing, and the quality of the films or TV shows that they're in. I mean, we're in the middle of a renaissance as far as TV goes. I mean, TV hasn't been this good in, I don't even know how long.
Yeah.
Maybe since
Ever.
Its first golden age, So there's a lot of great stuff out there. I think everyone can agree. And there's a lot of great independent films out there. Hollywood, there's a lot of explosions, and there's a lot of fun stuff, and that's has its place too.
What has caused this change? I mean, what's different now about the content?
I kind of analogize what's happening in TV and film right now to I'm a big skier, and I snowboarded for a while as well, and all my friends have gone back to skiing, and we always say that it was snowboarding that really saved skiing. Skiing got pretty stagnant. It was the same thing over and over again. Who wanted to watch, just going around a couple of gates? It got old. It never really did well on TV. Then you got a snowboard where people could go backwards, forwards, spin around, do all kinds of grabs, and it was like skateboarders who did tricks, suddenly now on the snow. And skiers were like, well, that's pretty cool. I wish I could do that. And then they invented twin-tip skis, and so suddenly guys on skis were doing all the same tricks that the guys on snowboards were, but now they have two edges, so they can do it in the big mountain in places where you really need two edges to handle it. And I kind of equate television with that. It's like I think the thing that started it was cable. I remember when HBO first started producing its own content, all of my friends who are actors would say, how cool would that be if I could go on a TV show and I could swear and I could do all the things that I wanted to say and I can't on a network show. And so suddenly that happened in cable. And because of that, it allowed them to explore outside of the normal old stale paradigms. And suddenly, I think the film industry is now looking back at that going, we're losing major talent to TV shows that are way better than anything that we've done in a long time. And I think that it's time for the film industry to step its game up.
And listen, the competition for filmmakers in Hollywood is, there are very few, there are very few of the big studios that make what they call independent films. They're not technically independent, but they're independent divisions. And, very few of the studios make those kind of edgy films anymore. Most of them are making big blockbusters. And they're starting to find out that they are risking a lot of cash on these giant blockbusters, and that they're I think it may swing back again in Hollywood. I think we may find, maybe in 10 years that we're, going through another golden age of Hollywood filmmaking, like in the 70s when the studios were making amazing movies that we all consider classics today that would never get made in the studio now. They would never make half of Coppola's films or Scorsese's films under the studio system. Those old ones, those original ones.
It's also pretty interesting to me, too, to see that a lot of those big dollar studio productions are just absolutely stocked with huge stars. Robert De Niro, Diane Keaton, 7 huge stars in one movie. And it used to be that you'd see one, maybe 2 in a movie, and then everyone else. And that's not even guaranteeing that they're going to make money. And, then you have a franchise like Fast and the Furious, which started out with, not entirely unknowns, but not any major stars at the time. And it's one of our highest grossing franchises that exists right now. And I think it's kind of confounding like I said, the old sort of stale paradigms aren't exactly working. And to me, it's exciting to see that people have to figure it out.
And it's also the star thing has always affected independent films, but it's really affecting it even more because there's so much competition, because it's so hard to get your film sold and distributed. small independent films are more and more being told you have to get a star. You have to get somebody who's bankable, whether it's, and sometimes that can be somebody who's bankable overseas, and which is often very different from who's bankable in the United States. Which is a weird pressure for people who are making movies under, $1 million. But, not to keep, touting Seg after his horn, but they've made those people accessible, which is one of the great things, and it may not be great for all the small actors who are just starting out, but it's helpful for filmmakers because, we're financing a movie, right? We're looking for financing for our next film right now. And of course we're saying, we have, 2 roles for an 18-year-old and a 21-year-old. So who's worth that in the box office these days? And it's a very difficult question to ask because you've got like 4 people to choose from. You got Chloe Moritz and like 2 others, so it's like, okay, there are other actors who are potentially interesting, but it's that push and pull with independence where it's like we really just want to make a great film, and those great films can often break through and find their audience. The question is, do you make a lot of money? Do you make a living off of it? Or are you, doing other stuff, commercial work, whatever work to get by and fund your art? And there's a lot of people who in the independent world are saying, listen, have a day job and make your art and then don't worry about it. And that's not a bad job. That's not a bad idea. It's a difficult life, but it's not a bad idea. So it's also a level of questioning how much the income is important,
So let's shift the topic just a little bit. By a show of hands, do we have any actors in the room? Quite a few. I think one thing that would be really interesting to hear from you guys is what would be a good game plan if you are either, a multi-hyphenate indie producer who's acting and really wants to, make a name in acting. What would be a good game plan today going forward?
Well, if you can make your own work, if you can get together with people, well, study, take your time. If you're young, incubate your talent and enjoy that freedom until before you get to the point where you have to think about it as a commodity. Because selling yourself is not the most fun thing in the world. It's not. No. And you have to be tough, You take a lot of rejection as an actor. But I'd say if you can get out there and make films with your peers, there's nothing better because, guys like me, I want to see what you've done. I want to see tape on you. I want to see, and if you have no tape, then all I can see is you in a theater production which is fine, but if there's nothing to see, then there's nothing to see. So get out there and make stuff, especially now.
Yeah, I think that's really smart. Like you said, you can do theater and have people come and see it, but trying to get people who are influential and powerful to come to a theater and sit down for 90 minutes and watch, they don't know what it's going to be. I can't guarantee it's going to be a great experience for them. It's impossible. It's hard to get someone to watch. My reel was like 8 minutes long, and my managers were like, everyone's going to turn that off by the time they've gotten a minute.
Make sure your movies are really great for the first 10 minutes.
Yeah. And
everything else can stink because they're all just they're on their phones and they're, okay, she's really good. We should call her in.
Yeah, it happens immediately. The judgments happen so quick, and I got to learn that when I was on Numbers. I said in a lot of the casting meetings and another show pilot that I did. I sat in on all the casting, and the judgments are made instantly. Almost when you walk in the room and say the first thing to them, they know if you're right for the part or not because they generally have an idea in their mind. But I always used to say that as an actor, you can't just go and act when you want to act. As a writer, you can sit down and write. You have that ability. As an actor, you kind of have to wait for someone to call. But again, what's changed now is that you don't have to. You can start doing stuff yourself. And you can, like you said, have something that you can show to someone that's easy to watch. A 1.5 to 3 minute thing that highlights something about you and your skills and your talent, your personality. And that, to me, again, is a really exciting thing. A lot of people now are tailoring their reels to a specific project they're auditioning for. It used to be you had one reel, your agent would send in the VHS copy, you didn't know if someone put it in the thing and watched it or not. And now, if you're playing a businessman, but you have a lot of stuff where you're the bad guy or whatever on your reel, nobody was really going to consider you for the business in it. But now you can start editing your own stuff. You can actually act little scenes out and put them there and actually tailor your reel and send it over the internet with a link, and people can actually see you specifically doing what you think is right for that role.
Yeah, and hook up with filmmakers who do it too. And I would also say that I mean, coming to things like this, volunteering to work at film festivals, especially if there are festivals where you know that industry people come, which doesn't mean you should be accosting Woody Allen the second you see him, but if you put yourself in a position where you can meet somebody and just get to know them and keep in touch somehow, the Hollywood folks are used to being approached, and they have this thing because it's just every 5 seconds somebody wants something. But by and large, a lot of people are just really know that they're looking for that to catch like lightning in a bottle. Casting is everything, except for a good story. Casting's everything. You want to find that diamond in the rough, or that diamond that you can just say, oh my God, there is something about this person that is just, this is the person. And then that can happen without an audition. I mean, they'll probably want to audition you later, but at least to begin with, I think putting yourself in the right places, as much as you can, and that can be, all kinds of places. So yeah.
That's great. I've got one more question for these guys, and then I'd love to turn this over and let you guys ask some questions. So think of what you'd like to ask. When you guys look into the future, 5 years down the road, where is the business of acting? How have things changed in 5 years?
I mean, I think acting, like this, the art form of acting has, and I could be totally wrong, but my opinion is that it's sort of evolved to where it's gonna be. I feel like, we had way back in the day, there was only stage, there was no film, and so everything had to be big and projected and all that. And then when, cameras came out, they started filming stuff, the performances took some time for them to evolve to a little smaller and more intimate and more real. And I think that we've seen, like, I watch acting performances now that there is not a hint of acting to me. I'm amazed at how far along acting has come. And I think that's where acting will always be. I think the question about the future is, how will it be viewed, on what platform, on what size of a screen, and where, and how much people will pay for it. And that, as we've talked about, that's sort of the big question from here.
I think that's astute. I think it's true. I mean, we've gotten to the point where, this sort of, this sort of Cassavetes-based improvising has become a part of filmmaking in a big way, and like in a Hollywood filmmaking. Judd Apatow's people, a lot of what they do is improvising. And when I say Cassavetes, I say that because before him, I mean, people were doing it, but nobody was doing it in a way that said, "Oh my God, we should all do this." Everybody was learning their lines and saying their lines, and there were brilliant actors, don't get me wrong. I mean, Marlon Brando, everybody, there were great acting, but we've gotten to a point where in terms of theory, in terms of practice of the art and craft of it, it's everywhere. You could be doing anything now. It depends on who you're working with and what the project is. But yeah, I think that what's changing is just, in 5 years, who knows? There'll probably be some new kind of camera that, I don't know. Who knows? I mean, it's changes so fast. But I think it's mostly about the dynamics of the business. With the amount of competition will probably just keep increasing. And the dust will settle on where the whole, like, difference between web and your phone and your TV and all that stuff will all be one big thing. And there will be minimum amounts of money that the unions will ask for, and non-union actors, go out, do your work, and don't worry about joining the union. Join the union when you're ready to join the union. Don't do it too soon. That's a big deal. I see a lot of young actors that join the union way too soon because you shut yourself out of a lot of work. Just keep doing the work. It's the same thing.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Is it's much work as you can possibly do.
That's great. Questions from the audience? Back here.
I'm sorry, for what?
So the question is
for
if there's SAG Indie, is there going to be a SAG Light?
Like a membership light, I guess is what you're asking, right?
Where membership. There are reduced fees actually in here. If you look at this, there are reduced fees, but but under a certain point, you're saying because some of the like the low budget agreement, everybody in the cast has to be SAG. Is that what you're?
And I think what he's asking is that like not every actor that's starting out who maybe can get into one of these low budget movies can afford the SAG dues, like the initiation fees.
Yeah.
Is that what you're asking?
I would imagine that's probably not going to happen. I can't speak for the union because I don't represent the union. But I mean, it costs a chunk of money up front. It does. The yearly dues are not much. But it does cost a chunk of money up front. And sometimes, depending on the project, if you can talk the producer, if they really love you, you can sometimes talk producers into paying that for you, once you get tapped hard lead. But, I couldn't answer that. I would imagine that probably won't happen. But
I think it's a good idea though, just for what it's worth.
I will mention it next time I talk to them. How about that?
Pass that up the
SAG
chain.
Light. Good branding too.
Other questions? So it's a two-part question. One is, how has Netflix impacted your acting? And the other part is, how has HD changed your approach to acting?
So, I mean, Netflix for me is the only thing I watch. I don't have television in my house. It's been probably 7 years since I've had a television connected to anything that delivers content. I will watch some stuff on Netflix in bed on my laptop with my wife before we go to bed. And so what's frustrating to me is that I don't have access to all the content out there. That I hear about some great shows that I would love to check, but I just cannot be beholden to someone else's schedule. And I can't imagine that anybody will for much longer. So, I mean, you ask a little bit about where the future is going. I mean, it has to go to content on demand. I mean, it can't just be that I got to sit down at 7 p.m. I got to be there sharp to watch it. In terms of what it's done to my acting, like I said, I've seen some stuff content that is on Netflix that I think is as evolved as I can imagine acting getting. Like I said, not a glimmer of someone actually acting. It looks real, it's intimate, and it's all about feeling. And to me, like some of the content that's there has made me sort of, look at what it is that I do and the choices that I make.
I would say the big downside to all of this is that movie theaters are dying. And that is too bad, because, as a filmmaker, I want to see those pictures big. There is something about, it's like a piece of art. When you see a piece of art on the internet, it's like, great. That's really cool. When you go to a museum and you see a giant painting by Jackson Pollock instead of on your computer, it's a completely different emotional reaction. It's a completely different experience. There's something religious, for lack of a better term, something spiritual about that. And there is something spiritual not only about seeing a picture big in a movie theater, but about being with other people experiencing that. And that is, I'm hoping that there will be a swing back to that. But it's tough because the kids don't go to movie theaters unless it's the big tentpole explosion movies. I mean, to be honest, I will go see films, independent films that I know I need to see in theaters because I love movies, but I'm a filmmaker. But, I know a lot of people that just haven't been to a movie theater in forever, and if they have, it's been to see, Iron Man, which is great, and I don't have a problem with that because I want to see Iron Man in a big theater. It's fun, but people are not going to theaters because the HD looks so great on their TVs, because they can sit in bed and watch it and they're busy. So it's in 5 years we may see less and less of that chance to do that.
I think you're right, too, that there is this sort of perception out there now that unless it's a big, huge action movie, you don't really need to bother seeing it on the screen. But you're right, there's just no question you lose something when you're not with an audience and you're not seeing it big in front of you. I had the opportunity to see Lawrence of Arabia. It was a remastered print that Spielberg had done out of his own library and invited the cast of Private Ryan to come watch it in a theater, and it was just all of us watching it, and I was blown away by that film. And I had seen bits of it on a television before, and I never really got why Lawrence of Arabia was such an amazing film. But you see it on a big screen with people, and it is an epic. It's a true epic. And
I mean, even like seeing like Frances Ha or something like that, which is an intimate movie. It's not big epic like Vistas, but there's still something about these intimate moments on a big screen that change them completely for us. And it's I think there's definitely something being lost if people don't keep going to the theaters.
I kind of think and hope that there may be a little bit of a resurgence of sort of the art house theater, and it won't really be just for art house films, but it will be for people who appreciate it enough to actually get up off their couch and go out and watch. And it may be more expensive, and it may have couches and it may have food and drinks, but I'm hoping that there's something like that so that that experience is not lost forever.
Dynamite, we have time for one more question. So real quickly for our online audience, the question is, how has your relationship with casting directors changed throughout your career?
So, I've been around long enough that I have sort of like my stable of fans as casting directors. When I say fans, I just mean like people who respect my work and think that I do a good job and make good choices. And they can always get me in the room, and they always will. Casting directors that I haven't read for that often, or it's been a long time since they've seen me, a lot of times just the feedback flat out is we can't get him in the room. They just want, huge names, and, he's not big enough. But casting directors that I've really sort of proven myself with time and time again over the 18 years I've been doing this can always get me in. And usually they're very honest and frank with me, and they're like, look, they got their offers out, but I think you're great for this, and we're going to do everything we can to get you, a fair shot. And what's awesome about that as an actor is that when you feel like someone cares about you and someone is rooting for you, it allows you to actually do your best job in the audition. The audition process is such an unfair process. I mean, there are actors that are great at auditioning, show up on set, and they kind of fall flat. There are actors that are terrible at auditioning, but when they get on a set, man, they kill it. And it's really hard to see that in an audition unless you've got someone who really cares and is willing to take the time and make you feel like the audition is a collaboration. Someone said this to me once, and I didn't really get it, but they said, no, man, you have the role. When you're auditioning, you've been cast. You get to go in there and you get to do it. Like, don't look at that as this is my opportunity to get the job. This is your opportunity to do it. You got the job. And it takes those casting directors that are friendly and supportive to get that out of you. I can't tell you how many times I've just fallen apart because I walk in and I'm like, hey, how you guys doing? And they're like, hi, can you please sit down? Okay, we got to get going. And then they just look at you. And it's like you can't perform under that, And
it's amazing anything good gets made because of how bad the casting process is. It's a terrible process. It's totally unfair. It makes no sense creatively because it's just like it's more artificial than filmmaking ever will be. Because at least you are there to do something. It's like you're just begging for a job. But I would recommend to everybody who's an actor and filmmakers to watch a film that my friend made called Casting By. It's just out, and it's about the casting process. It's about the history of the casting director. But what's interesting about it to me is that they interview all these amazing actors and talk about how they first went out and started getting cast in things and how they started to get relationships. And there are people who are like John Voight completely blew it with this major casting director like a few times and then kind of just followed this person around and was like, really, I'm good. I swear I'm good. And kept like, Paul, and there is a tenacity to it. There is, they seem out of reach. Agents even more so. Agents are there. Agents will show up when you're making money. When you are already making money, they will say, hey, great, I want to make money too. Let's go. Managers, if you can find somebody that's a good manager, they care about you a little more, supposedly. They're supposed to care about your overall thing a little more. Casting directors, it's really tough. It's really tough to get to any of them because they've got a million people trying to get to them. But yeah.
One thing that I would add that I found actually really helps me for auditions and that casting process is I haven't studied that much. I did a little bit of studying with a guy, Harry Master George, who I love, and his philosophy was just, it's a job. Like, preparing for a role is a job. You should sit down like anyone else does in a job, spend 8 hours a day, close your eyes, imagine what the character is going through. Imagine how he's feeling and all that. And to me, that was a really simple take on acting, and that's what I do. I just imagine it. And if I can like really see it in my eyes, it's pretty easy to have it come out. But again, the casting process, the auditioning process is very different. And what I found helped me a lot was cold reading classes. Because when you don't have a chance to prepare something, you just quickly look at it, read through it a few times, then you go give it a shot. You're inherently uncomfortable. And so you start to learn how to deliver lines and create a character and make something happen when you're inherently a little uncomfortable. And in the casting process, you're always going to be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah,
so,
and I mean, as a director, I would rather see somebody come in and go balls out for the completely wrong choice than make no choices at all. You know
but
what I
that's
mean?
interesting that you say that, because so many times I'll try that. I'm like, I'm going balls out with my choice, and they go, thanks so much, appreciate it. The feedback comes back, and they're like, no, they just thought you were a little too this or a little too that. I'm like, but I made a choice. Like, it's so rare, and you know, it sounds like you're one who does, but it's so rare that directors will actually say, hey, I see you made a choice. It's not the right one for this, or at least for me,
How about trying
and
it
I'd like
this
you to
way?
try
Yeah,
something
because
else.
they usually don't give you enough time.
Yeah.
And which is retarded. And they should all give you a little more time.
Retarded, that's exactly what it is, yeah. That's the technical
So
term for
on
what that is.
note,
No, it's totally retarded. But I think on that note, just do it. Just go out, do it, make the choices, and make the work. And like you just said, you go in there and do
Always
your scene.
offer, though, to do it another way. I've found that a lot of times I'm on the way out the door, and I'll be like, hey, by the way, is there anything else you want me to try? And one person in the room will pipe up and go, you know what, yeah, actually, I would like you to. And I realize I wouldn't have had that second shot if I didn't ask them.
Yeah,
Just
stand
ask-
up for
ask
yourself.
for it.
Totally. Don't take no for an answer.
It's
right
your
away.
time,
Yeah,
you know, it
totally.
really is.
gentlemen, thank you. This has been really, really great.
Really, thank you.
fantastic.
Thanks for coming, you guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
having
you.
you here.
I encourage you to take pictures of these gentlemen and tweet them and put them on Facebook and hashtag ITVFest. And thank you very much.
Working that social media angle, buddy. Got to learn from you.